Hi there, it's Sarah Eber again. Here we are with Module 2, and I named this one Dissecting the Food Package Labeling for FNET Professionals. But the truth is, a lot of the pieces in this could probably be used really well for anybody. And so this module actually has 3 sessions, and we'll do one at a time, and hopefully they'll be relatively short so you can kind of move through them. As always, there is a pre-test and a post-test. So make sure you fill out the pre-test before you start viewing. So if you haven't done that yet, hit pause and do the pre-test, and then make sure you do the post-test afterward. Raydonna should have those for you, and then I'll have those recorded and make a certificate for you. If, as usual, if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for additional staff training that you would like to hear, something that you think would really help you as you work with your constituents, please email me or text me, and I will be thrilled to make those for you. Okay, so as we work through session 1, we're looking. We want to deal with the food package versus the food label. Next. All right, and remember from our first module, I'm hoping you are laughing as you're looking at this. So starting our food label discussion, here we go. Sometimes we just have no control regardless of what the FDA does. If it follows the guidelines, it can go in the food label. What can I say? Okay, so in this session, I'm hoping that you'll be able to identify, some new changes to the nutrition facts label, and that you'll be able to differentiate between the weight of a food product and the weight of the nutrients in the food product, because I think that comes under some confusion sometimes. Okay, so the food package versus the nutrition labeling. Both are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, by the FDA. There are no new changes to food packaging labels. There are new nutrition facts label changes as of 2020. There have been no new changes to the food packaging label since 2013. So we're working in both places. Okay, so a quick word about the packaging. Some of the information can be really confusing. And it really, honestly, most of the information about the packaging is written as guidance for industry, not consumers. But between companies trying to make food claims and supplement companies, it can get really confusing. So if you are interested in more information about the food packing label, the food labeling guide is in the references at the end of our 3rd session, and it is 132 pages of guidance from the FDA for food label packagers to know what to put on the packaging. Generally speaking, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, there has to be complaints filed with the FDA. And then if there's enough complaints, then the FDA will investigate. Sometimes they're pretty hefty fines. Sometimes they're just kind of slaps on the wrist and fix it. It just varies depending on the level of problem. Okay, so as you're navigating the food package, a couple of key things I wanted to point out to you. As you're looking at this, this is what they call the information label. Oh, oops, my bad. So information label you see is kind of note over here to the right. What is a PDP? PDP stands for Principal Display Panel. Then that is actually the main panel on the food that you look at, the PDP. If the main panel is too small to fit the nutrition facts, the ingredients, the manufacturer, or the distributor and the country of origin, they're supposed to place it on the label to the right, which is why this is then called the information label. Okay. Artwork or any additional writing included in this section is not supposed to be there because it's considered distracting. So that's why a lot of times food labels can look kind of plain. They do so much work with the artwork on the front, and then whenever you go to look at the information panel, it's pretty plain and a bunch of words, and a lot of people have a tendency to kind of blow it off. And I wanted to show you an example of that, and this would be one that looks like it's too distracting. You notice how they put a picture between the nutrition facts and the ingredients and the manufacturer information. It's important, I think, as nutrition professionals that we help people decipher all the crazy information that the manufacturers can put on the food labels. We want our people to know where to go straight away to get the facts. And even though this is an FDA situation, this kind of stuff, the distracting stuff, still shows up on these packages and can be really confusing for our consumers. So a basic kind of generic look at the food package. Required product recognition is supposed to be on the front part of the label, okay? So any brand rice, and a picture that should be sort of what it is inside the package. And then you'll notice down here that there's a net weight in ounces and in a metric unit. And this is only supposed to take, if you can believe it or not, about 30% or less of the label. Okay, that PDP, that display panel, should contain some wording to indicate what the product actually is. And it has to state the net quantity of food. If the product is solid, semi-solid, or viscous, it's generally listed by weight. If it's liquid, then it's listed in fluid measure and it has to be in both metric and US customary units. If you have questions about other packing specifications, let me know, because I'm happy to share a copy, a full, like a PDF of that food labeling guideline. Reminding you that it is 132 pages of boring. Okay, so now for the interesting part. Now we get straight to our nutrition facts label. And you all, I think, are probably already pretty well aware of this. But let's go ahead and dissect it. And we'll talk a little bit about, I think, some of the things that can be confusing. First of all, here's a side-by-side. And I want you to start, if you haven't seen this online, see if you can guess what this product is. Okay, if you've already seen it online, it's not as much fun, I guess. But if you haven't, see if you can figure out what is 2/3 of a cup, that someone's only going to eat 2/3 of a cup of this product. Okay, so looking at the new changes, notice they flipped the serving size and the servings per container. Okay, and the serving size is now in bold print, and it's on the bottom where it's a little more prominent. Okay, calories are a lot bolder and big, and they got rid of calories from fat. That's no longer required. Now, as you look through the food label, a few other things have changed. What I'm going to point out to you, because this is a confusing point, the daily values have been updated. Okay, the daily values have not changed. All right? The daily values have not changed. What has changed is the numbers they are based off of. Okay, percent daily value has always been on the food label, and you can see it right here. Okay, this looks a little bit different, doesn't it? And we're going to discuss that a little more in depth in session 2, because percent daily values, I think they are tools for us to teach consumers how to use the label, but for nutrition professionals, we need to know what they're based on, and we're going to spend a little more time with them in session 2. But for right now, for session 1, these have been updated. Now, again, they are not new to the food label. What they're based on is different. All right. And then in addition to that, you will see added sugars are now included, and the minerals have, and the what we call the micronutrients versus macronutrients. Okay, the word macronutrient means big nutrient. It means nutrients that we need a lot of. Okay, that would be fat, carbohydrate, and protein. Micronutrients are nutrients that are every bit as important, maybe more important, but are not necessarily needed in large amounts. They are needed in micro amounts. So that's that's a kind of a catch-all term for vitamins and minerals. All right, so let's start off by focusing in just for a minute on the serving size. Okay, before I do that, let's back up a minute. One other thing I want to make sure I show you. Okay, so the added sugars are new, as is the addition of vitamin D and potassium. Vitamin C and vitamin A were removed. We do have a publication called Using and Understanding the Food Label that is in graphic design right now. And it'll be available. It'll also include some fact sheets, like a breakout about carbohydrate, a breakout about fiber. And those will be there for you to use anytime you need them, or use as a reference, or to give out to consumers, customers, and clients as soon as it gets through graphic design. Okay, or for classes for that matter. So again, any guesses on what this food product is? Originally, even though it says on this original label 2/3 of a cup, this product usually used to list serving size as a half a cup. Not that I agree that people only eat a half a cup of this, or even only 2/3 of a cup of this at a time. But the answer will come at the end. Be advised, total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrate, dietary fiber, total sugars were always there, okay? Added sugars is new. Protein was always there. And these things are mandatory now on the food label. So if you see extra things like monounsaturated fat or soluble fiber or insoluble fiber, those are voluntary additions to the label. Same thing whenever you see additional micronutrients listed, and we'll mention that again later. But if those are listed, they are considered voluntary additions to the label, and those are allowed. Okay, so a quick word about the serving sizes. The new label guidelines encourage packagers to update serving sizes to a more reasonable or usual size. These are not recommended serving amounts. You know, we always used to talk about recommended serving amounts were half a cup of this, or a fourth of a cup of that, or 3/4 of a cup of that, kind of based on that old exchange system, just to make it easy to kind of put foods in categories and nutrients. Okay, so that's not what this is about. These are not recommended serving amounts. Generally, they are much higher than the old exchange system that had most things in those more standard amounts. And despite FDA efforts at providing this information, manufacturers are not required to use these usual portion sizes. Okay, these usual portion sizes are referred to as reference amounts customarily consumed. That's a big old mouthful. We abbreviated RACC. So reference amounts customarily consumed. Those are that is what this is based on now. So you might have seen in the past, this lasagna label might have said serving size half a cup. Well, who's going to eat half a cup of lasagna? Nobody. So the FDA went back through and said, okay, can you please make this reference amount 1 cup? And so the manufacturers will go through and either do it or not, but it is recommended. It is not required by law. It was requested. Okay, so make sure that that's clear. All right, so don't forget, it is a recommended amount, not necessarily required. So that means they can still kind of decide whatever serving size they want that to be. As long as they provide the nutrition information for that amount and the serving size, they're still legal. Okay, don't let that confuse you. Okay, so to the bolder fonts. Note how much easier this thing is to read. The fonts are larger and bolder. They also give you some notes on using the percent daily values. We'll explore those in session 2. But for now, maybe the best thing to teach people is if the percent is 5 or lower, this food does not provide much of this. If it is 20% or above, it contains a reasonable amount. Now, big caution. This is neither good or bad as a standalone number. There's really no such thing as bad food. And I think as a nutrition professional, it's one of those things I feel pretty strongly about. We have to be really careful not to vilify food. Okay, and that's why I actually have a nurse practitioner friend, I may have told you this before, who, of all the things she remembers, the first thing she says when she sees me is no such thing as bad food, because that's what I always told her. No such thing as bad food. And that was my way to keep her from vilifying chocolate chip cookies so she wouldn't eat too many of them, right? If I can't have it, I really want it. But if I can't have it, it's not that big a deal. We've got to not vilify food. And it's not really good food or bad food. It's just a number that represents an amount in this food item. Okay, and then depending on an individual's health goals, these numbers can be very helpful. So when is high fat a good thing? Well, if you have pulmonary disease or if you're trying to gain some weight, higher fat may be a good thing. Okay, when is it a bad thing? Well, if you're dealing with heart disease, or if you have trouble digesting fat for one reason or another. When is high sodium a good thing? You know, when is high sodium? Well, sometimes people are actually told to increase their sodium to help with their blood pressure, but we all know that there is a correspondence to high salt intake and high blood pressure. And with so many people with hypertension, high sodium is not necessarily a good thing for a lot of people, but for some people it may be exactly what they need to know. They need more than somebody else. So that's why it's not a good number or a bad number. It's just a high or a low reference when you look at these things. And when is high sugar a good thing? Again, when you're trying to gain some weight, extra sugar calories are not that big a deal. When's it a bad thing? Well, if you're trying to watch your blood sugar, you want to get something that doesn't have a lot of added sugars. Or if that whole inflammation and added sugar thing, you're trying to keep your inflammatory markers down, you try to choose foods that don't have a lot of added sugar to them. Okay, now you notice that calories don't have a percent daily value, and neither does protein. Why? Well, because calories indicate energy, okay? And everybody's energy needs are going to be different. Same thing with their protein needs. And calories don't always reflect nutrient density. So we're going to take a minute and talk about nutrient density. But for right now, that's part of the reason why you don't see daily values on calories or protein. Okay, so what is nutrient density? All right. I wanted to take a minute, even though this is a little bit of a jump out of the food label, because even the food label does help us gauge nutrient density to some extent, but this term gets thrown around a lot. So I think it's important to know what this means. Nutrient density, okay. Density means that the product of food has a lot of something in a small amount of that food, okay? So calorie density means lots of energy in a small amount. Can you think of people who need lots of calories in a small amount? I always think straight to my some of my nursing home patients who they eat like little birds. So I want to pack all the calories and protein I can in every bite. So that would be a very calorie dense food that I try to serve them. Okay. Usually energy comes from, remember where it comes from? There's 3 nutrients that give you energy: carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Okay. Vitamins and minerals don't give you calories. Carbohydrate, protein, and fat do. Okay, so often when foods are high in high calorie density, there's a lot of calories in a set serving amount. Typically the fat is the driver there, because remember, there's 9 calories in a gram of fat versus 4 calories in a gram of protein or a gram of carbohydrate. Okay, so you can see that something high in calorie is going to be usually higher in carbs or fat. Different conditions have different needs. Now, the other issue that we sort of run into is the sodium density. And, you know, we are all sometimes, I don't know if any of us is ever completely unsurprised when we look at the sodium content in some of the food. You know, you flip those boxes and you're like, how much salt's in there? Holy cow. You know, that is a lot of salt. And a lot of processed foods use a lot of salt to boost the flavor because of the nature of the processing. So understanding that sodium level and using that high-low buffer with the percent daily value can be really helpful on that if you're not sure what your sodium needs actually are. There's also an issue of vitamin and mineral density. Okay, and I wanted to take a minute about that because I'm kind of, I guess this is sort of a pet peeve of mine, because I'm all about foods that are nutrient dense and fill you up, right? So foods that are nutrient dense to me are the ones that are full of vitamins and minerals, even in a small amount. So, and what foods do that for us? Well, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and lean meat as well. I mean, they have a lot of vitamins and minerals in them despite their calories. So when you're looking at trying to help your consumers, your clients gauge food, nutrient density becomes important. And it is also a term that gets thrown around a lot, I think, sometimes inappropriately. So that way we're all clear. When you talk about nutrient density, it might be related to calories and carbohydrate and fat, or it might be related to all the micronutrients like vitamins and minerals and the phytochemicals and isoflavonoids and all these functional parts of food that we hear about all the time. And that would be another thing too, is as we work through some of this, if you all feel like you're not as familiar with some of the micronutrients and some of those terms, let me know, and we can design other staff trainings on some of those to talk about those because they're kind of exciting parts of food that they're pieces of food that don't necessarily fit into vitamins and minerals. Anyway, that's nutrient density. And then there's the added sugars. Okay, so I actually put 3 labels here side by side because I thought this would be kind of fun to see some of the differences. Okay, so remember our mystery food, right? Our mystery food where the serving size is 2/3 of a cup, right? Here's the new label, here's the old label. And we're looking through this. So note the addition from the old label to the new label. Here's the added sugars. So in this particular product, it gave sugars as 12. And now we see that out of those 12 grams, 10 grams are actually added. But that means that 2 grams were naturally occurring in one of the base pieces of this food. So even though the format's new, the added sugars, those are just not included here. So it can be a little bit misleading. Now, there's exceptions in terms of this to every rule. And note, now this is an old label, okay, because this isn't pulled from a new label. But, well, actually, yes, it is. Vitamin D, calcium. This is a new label. So this is a new label. Note the serving size. This is a totally different product than these two. But I wanted to show it to you because here we have total sugars and added sugars isn't in there, is it? And yet, the total carbohydrate is 17 grams, and all 17 are sugar. So what does that mean? What is that? And there's like 0 of anything else. Well, this is 1 tablespoon. So what do you suppose this is? If you guessed honey, you're right. Okay, honey and molasses, natural sugars like that, do not have to include added sugars because it's all natural sugar that came with honey. Maple syrup is kind of the same way unless some additional sugar's been added. And I think that's a kind of an important consumer education piece because sometimes maple flavored syrup, you need to flip it and look. That added sugar can actually be your first clue that it's not all maple syrup in there. A lot of it could be high fructose corn syrup or something other added sugar added back to that product with just a little maple flavor. So that part kind of comes in handy, but it also compels us to go on and look at the ingredient label so we can see what's really in there. And then to the micronutrient information. So again, this is our mystery product, 2/3 of a cup of something. And you can see here that there's vitamin A and C, calcium and iron. On the new label, we only have vitamin D. We still have calcium and we have iron, but we have potassium at the bottom now. And the other big difference I think that's definitely noteworthy is some of these other numbers. Okay. All right. So, and the other piece is all this confusing information at the bottom is now no longer there. Okay. So vitamin A are removed and vitamin D and potassium are added. Why? Well, as it turns out, back when the last census was done and we pulled all the NHANES data and all the nutrition information from those census and in the last NHANES survey, we identified that Americans were low in vitamin A and C in their diets. Okay, so this information was included on the food label. So since then, we've gotten additional data, and we have found that we know, and as you go in and out of the doctor, if you've had your labs checked and they come back and told you that your vitamin D levels were low, a lot of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. And as it turns out, we're not seeing the deficiency in vitamin A and C anymore. Iron and calcium are still problems. We're still not getting enough of those in the American diet as a general statement. The other interesting addition is the potassium. Why is this? Well, and I'll probably say this more than once because this is always very interesting to me. But potassium and calcium we already know calcium and osteoporosis and strong bones. But calcium and potassium both are very important for blood pressure. The other piece of that is calcium and iron and potassium have a tendency to be depleted with a lot of the medications that a lot of us are on. So even though we may be getting some good sources of these vitamins or these minerals, the medicine we're on sometimes keeps us from absorbing them really well. So we're really not getting enough, and that's causing us some issues with our chronic illnesses. So that's why they're included. Also note that in addition to the percent daily value, the actual measured amount of those nutrients is included. Okay. The nutrition facts label must list total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrate, dietary fiber, total sugars, added sugars, protein, and these vitamins and minerals. And while the actual amount and the percent daily value of vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium must be listed, other vitamins and minerals may be listed voluntarily by the manufacturer. However, they are required to list any vitamins and minerals that are added to the food, or if a statement is made on the package labeling about how their health effects or the amount contained in the food has to do with that. So if it says high in magnesium, then they have to include magnesium on the food label. Similarly, supplement facts labels are required to list the same nutrients as the nutrition facts label when any of these nutrients are found in the supplement in an amount considered greater than 0. Okay, so a lot of the regulations in that great big listing guide that I was telling you about, a lot of it they've had to adapt because of supplement companies and some of the things they do with things. Okay, so the mystery food is vanilla ice cream. Okay, so, and you may have already guessed that. So here's the last question to ponder. Did anybody ever just eat half a cup of ice cream at a time? Does anybody ever really only eat 2/3 of a cup of ice cream at a time? I don't know. You be the judge. But it's not good or bad. It just is. Don't forget to fill out your post tests. Stay tuned or flip over. We can go through session 2. More on that exciting label. Bye now.